maybe touch a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, in that same research you had mentioned that you guys were looking at the ability of a foliar applied material, i.e. bioflavonoids, and how that impacted carbon sequestration. Could you touch on that?
Yeah, sure.
Cycling?
So, back to photosynthesis, I guess, is photosynthesis creates this glucose molecules, a carbohydrate, and that carbohydrate in different plants, I guess it's arguably about 50 to 60% of that carbohydrates move down to the roots and then exudated out into the soil to feed soil biology. And so in carbon sequestration, in soil organic carbon, the more that the plant can push down into the soil and exudate, the more it's got available, the more it will come. It's just math. It's the more 60% of one number and 60% of another number. A bigger number is more. So the more it can push down out into the soil in the form of exudation, again, the plant, because that photosynthesis is triggering this efficiency, then the plant wants more nutrition. So the plant's going to feed more biology to get more nutrition and attract and push out more root system and touch more soil and farm, and nurture and farm that biology around its root system. Mycorrhizae in particular are the ones that is long hair extensions almost for roots, and they cover so much more ground than the root itself can cover. So they want that mycorrhizae to bring nutrition. They're basically little railway lines bringing up nutrients, and they're elongating based on the carbon they're being fed from, and that carbon source is the plant feeding the carbon into the soil, and that's where you get soil organic carbon, and you get more of that network below the ground that you can form, particularly with fungi, is permanence. So you get carbon permanence into the soil. And the more carbon, if you can move up the carbon by just even, we're starting, most of the farm soils around the world are at very low numbers of carbon, sub 2%, sub 1%. And I think there was a study done not long ago that a lot of the soils in the United States are 0.5% of carbon in the soil, in the top layers of the soil at least anyway. And that's just because not anybody forced it to happen. It's just the way we've been farming, and the reverse of that is just to get the plant efficiency, as I was talking about in photosynthesis, more carbohydrate to be formed, and then treat the soils in such a way that those soil organisms are not wiped out every cycle, or not wiped out by synthetic chemicals or fertilizers, or and if you overuse of things like urea and soil disturbances, I mean, there's a need to till sometimes, but some of the time you can try and get away with it, or till to a smaller level in the soil and not go too deep. And there's reasons for treating the soil with a bit more respect, I suppose, and keeping that soil biology alive. The more you can keep it alive and without less mortality every year you build more and more and more of it, and then you build it at a deeper level.
Did you guys see a percentage increase on that independent research that you saw on?
Yeah, we've done. It takes a while to build it, so looking at the numbers, we did a quick trial recently with a plant called a safflower, and a safflower has a really good, big taproot, and it's a decent sized sort of plant. And in a 3-month period, we saw I think it was like an 18% increase in soil carbon content. Doesn't mean it had 18% carbon in the soil. It was an increase of 18%. It was pretty low to start with, but we kicked it up a couple of notches, and that was pretty. That was an incentive for us to continue with like a bigger program. So we're doing some big programs at the moment back home in Australia.
That's awesome.